This is dedicated to everyone in my life right now. I mean, everyone is in people I've just met, people I've known for years, people I've unintentionally hurt, people I've been brutally honest with, and people that I just love in general. Everyone I've mentioned means something to me, regardless of the past, present, or future, because of our shared moments of impact. Moments of impact. It seems like I've been hearing that phrase more and more recently, or maybe it's just that I have this intrigue with the way it looks and sounds. Truth be told, I have no idea what it means. Moments of impact. If you've seen the movie The Vow with Rachel McAdams and Channing Tatum, you know the story. Car accident, wife loses memory, can't remember husband tries to win her back, husband loses until he wins. Nothing remarkable about that. But what stands out for me is a quote by Channing Tatum's character, Leo. He talks about moments of impact. At some point in the movie, he says, the thing is, each of us is a sum total of every moment we've ever experienced with every the people we've ever known. And it's these moments that become our history, like our own personal greatest hits of memories that we play in our minds over and over again. Moments of impact. And I think about these moments of impact, and maybe that word moments of impact has its own meaning. Maybe it's a definition that's formed by the personality of the interpreter. Now, I'm certainly not Channing Tatum, but to me, moments of impact are moments of inspiration. Something that I use as an excuse for my overwhelming awe of the world. And I've been talking lately about how people are my sort of inspiration, that they themselves cause my moments of impact. And their stories have struck me in a special way, makes me sometimes stop and just think about the world. And when we wonder about the world, sometimes we start wondering about ourselves. Now, these moments of impact are everyday moments that change our lives in some way, shape, or form. Let me give you some examples. My friend Jim is a single dad who has raised an amazing son, Mason. Mason is now 28. When Mason was 14, he and Jim were arguing about yard work or mowing the lawn or something, and in frustration, my friend Jim turns to his son and says, "I'm sorry, son. I've never had a 14-year-old before, and I'm doing the best I can." Well, Mason looks at his dad and says, "Well, Dad, I'm sorry too. I've never been a 14-year-old before, and I'm doing the best I can." Jim said for him that was a moment of impact that totally changed how he viewed his son. He no longer saw Mason as just this lazy, contrary 14-year-old, but rather now as a young man struggling on the verge of becoming a man. Or I think back a couple years ago at our Master Trainer Summit, we're having a break and I'm walking out of the training room as my friend and colleague Eileen Geller is walking into the training room. And she looks up at me and smiles and says, "You have the most perfect posture." Really? I've always thought I had lousy posture, kind of stumped over, had these crazy shoulders that want to rise up. But I found myself, and still to this day, find myself standing a bit taller, holding myself a little more erect, all because of that 5-second moment of interaction. And what did it cost her? Or I think about my friends out in the audience, Tanner Woodward and Tiffany David, who drove an hour and a half in a snowstorm just to have dinner with me when I was in their great state of Montana. Or I think about the encouraging texts I got today from my friend Cricket Buckler and Paul Luster. These moments of impact are all around us. Let me get to my point. People in my life have changed it in some way, shape, or form. I am who I am because of the people in my life, because of these positive moments of impact. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is Proverbs 27:17. It says, "Iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." If that proverb is true, then I am the sharpest guy in this room. The Stanford Institute says that the amount of money made in any endeavor is only influenced 12% by knowledge and 88% by how much we interact and deal with other people. Interesting. If you go to the website ask.com, you'll find that most of us, on an average, will meet about 10,000 people in our lifetime. It's a lot of people. I think I've been told there are about 325 people in this room. And if each of us changed the lives of just 10 people, and those people change the lives of 10 people, just 10, then in 5 generations, 125 years, we will have changed the lives of 32,500,000 people. Moments of impact. Now, I graduated magna cum laude with a doctorate from the School of Hard Knocks and realized that there are 3 simple things that will increase the likeliness that we not only recognize these moments, but we learn from them as well. We want to, first of all, be genuine, be certain of who you are and what you stand for, and finally, be present. Let's start with that first one, be genuine. If you've been in my class, you know that I use a lot of self-disclosure up front. I read an article one time that said, if you want people to open up to you, tell them something personal about yourself. So I spend a good portion of the opening telling about my childhood, telling people that my 88-year-old father still lives in the house that I grew up in, that I grew up in a house where every day I was told I was loved, shaped my psyche. Now for me, the glass is irrevocably always half full. My favorite color is blue, and I have this loathsome desire against anything mushroom. But I just want people to get to know me because I want the persona people see in class to be the same persona people would see at dinner or out in the hall. I try and be as genuine as possible. I learned a mantra from Joseph years ago that I say before every class: Lord, help me to bless and not impress. Let me bless, not impress. Let me be genuine. In the 1920s, one of the most recognizable people in the entire world was Charlie Chaplin. People from around the world knew him from his movies, the silent movies, particularly Little Tramp. The story is told that Charlie Chaplin was walking down the streets of Paris, France one day and passed a theater that was holding a Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest. So Charlie Chaplin enters a Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest. He came in third. And when he tried to talk to the people and convince them he was really Charlie Chaplin, they didn't believe him because the persona people saw on screen was so different than the persona that was right in front of them. The genuineness did not come through. So help me to bless and not impress. Well, I think it's also important to be certain of who you are and what you stand for. In the 1920s, Al Capone was notorious for enmeshing the city of Chicago in a variety of things from bootleg whiskey to prostitution to murder. And there was also a gentleman in Chicago at the same time, Easy Eddie. That's Easy Eddie as well as Al Capone. Easy Eddie was Al Capone's lawyer, very good. And it was his skill as a lawyer that kept Al Capone out of prison. There's Easy Eddie. And because of his skill, Al Capone rewarded Easy Eddie handsomely. Easy Eddie's family had a mansion. It was fenced in. They had lived-in servants. They had every modern convenience. Their house literally took up an entire city block in Chicago. And in spite of these sordid atrocities, there was a soft spot in Easy Eddie's life. He had a son that he loved very, very much. And Easy Eddie finally came to the realization that he could give his son a lot of things money could buy, the best schools, the best clothes, but there were 2 things he couldn't give his son: a good name and a good reputation. So he struggled with this and finally decided that what was most important to him was his son. And so in his attempt to rise above these sordid atrocities, in an effort to give his son a good name, to provide a better example, to learn right from wrong, he decides to go to the feds and testify against Al Capone, knowing it would be at a great price. He testifies against Al Capone, and a year later is shot down and murdered on a lonely Chicago street. So juxtapose that story with this story. We're going to move ahead about 20 years. This is Lieutenant Butch O'Hare, who was a naval pilot in World War II, stationed on the USS Lexington in the South Pacific. One day, as they leave to go on a mission, he realizes once they've got airborne that someone has forgotten to top off his tank, so he didn't have enough gas. The flight commander ordered him back to the ship. And as he turns back to the ship, he sees something that turns his blood cold. He sees a squadron of Japanese bombers coming toward the American fleet. Doing the only thing he knew what to do in the moment, he single-handedly attacks this fleet of Japanese bombers, guns blazing, and when ammunition is done, he's out of ammunition. He continues to dive bomb these planes, trying to nip and tear off a wing or a tail. Finally, the Japanese squadron leaves, and he limps back to the ship, and he tells them what's happened. Well, during World War II, they mounted cameras on the planes to learn how the planes maneuvered during air battles. And when the film was developed, the film told the tale. Butch O'Hare had shot down 5 Japanese bombers. And for that, for his heroic efforts, he became the Navy's first ace in World War II and the very first naval aviator to win the Congressional Medal of Honor. He died a year later in an air battle at the age of 29. That was February 20th, 1942. But his hometown refused to not honor the heroics of this young man, and so today, O'Hare Airport in Chicago is named for Butch O'Hare. So the next time you're in O'Hare Airport, you can go between Terminal 1 and Terminal 2, see his monument, his statue, as well as his Congressional Medal of Honor. Now, you may be asking, what do these two stories have in common? Butch O'Hare was Easy Eddie's son. And many people have speculated that had Easy Eddie not done the right thing, not set a good example for his son, that Butch O'Hare may not have had the moments of impact that he had. So be certain of who you are and what you stand for. Finally, I think it's probably most important to be present. And I think the problem with communication is that we don't listen to understand. We listen to reply. I mean, we may physically be there in the conversation, but we're not present. Those of you who know me know that I'm a huge animal lover. And last March of 2014, on a whim, I stopped by the local animal shelter and was entranced by this 3.5-month-old puppy. And so I went in there and I said, tell me about this dog. And they said, well, a family with a 3-year-old adopted him. He's a puppy. He jumps on the kid, knocks the kid down, scratches the kid. They bring the dog back. And I said, well, what happened to him? They said, well, we'll probably put him down. He's been deemed aggressive. And for a full week, I struggled and said, I can't let that happen. And so I went and I adopted this puppy. I named him Scout. This is Scout. There's not an aggressive bone in this dog's body. This is his 1-year birthday shot, December 1st. This is Scout several months ago at a friend's lake house. Scout is the most present creature I've ever seen. I don't care whether he's chewing on a toy, waiting for a treat at the dog park, riding with his head out the sunroof. He is in the moment. He does not care about what his next meal will be, what will happen 15 minutes, what happened last night. It's all about in the moment. Now, some of you may know that for the last 3 years, as part of my physical fitness regime, I've been practicing hot yoga. Now, hot yoga is not a yoga class with beautiful women in it. A hot yoga class is a yoga class in a room where the temperature is between 95 and 105 degrees, 40% humidity. So there's a lot of sweating that is going along. And anytime you do a pose, we typically hold it. And if we're doing a balancing pose, and I don't know if I can do it in these shoes, they always say, find a spot, focus on it, and don't move your focus. So if I'm in chair, and I'm trying to transition into Warrior 3, I have to find a spot and focus on it. And if I want to transition from Warrior 3 into Tree, if I take my focus off of my spot, I fall out of the pose. And a lot of times what happens is we don't stay present and we fall out of the pose. Well, one of my favorite yoga instructors is a girl by the name of Nicole, and she's always talking about this thing called dynamic stillness. And I love that. And she says, you know, we're so hectic and we're moving at all this pace. And when we're in a yoga pose, all of our muscles are in this dynamic stillness. Another one of my favorite yoga instructors is Betty Callister. This is Betty right there. Betty is one of the happiest people I've ever met. She's also one of the most connecting. If you talk to Betty, you feel like you're the only person that's important to her. I don't care what's swirling around her. She is so present. And I think what happens is when life becomes hectic, stressful and overwhelming, that stillness seems so difficult and far away. And I think it can be said that our disconnection with those around us creates imbalance in every aspect of our lives. Last month, on June 28th at 5:45 in the evening on a Sunday afternoon, a small plane crashed into the house in Plainville, Massachusetts, killing the 3 passengers aboard, a doctor, his wife, and teenage daughter. You see, my friend Betty Callister was on that plane. Her and her husband were taking their daughter on a potential college trip. And I've thought a lot over the last couple of weeks about what might be going through Betty's head in those last moments. Was she praying for the safety of the people in the house? That would have been Betty. Was she thinking about the people that she loved? That would have been Betty. Or maybe she was thinking about her daughter who was back in Knoxville who would never see them again. That was certainly Betty. You know, I just think it's about being present. On the Friday, 2 days before the crash, Betty was in a yoga class with me. In typical Betty fashion, after the class, we left and we were laughing, and as we walked out, she said, "Hey, do you want to go get some lunch?" And I said, "No, let's do it another time." Moments of impact. I cannot tell you how many times I wish I had that moment back. And it's made me think about all the other moments in my life that I've let slip away because I wasn't present. Because I had my own agenda. I pray that you don't leave this conference this afternoon without finding at least one person and telling them how important they are to you and how you've impacted them in a positive way. It's about being present. Be genuine. Be certain of who you are and what you stand for. I'm going to ask you to take a little quiz. You don't have to answer aloud. I just want you to think about this in your head. Can you name the 5 wealthiest people in the world? Can you name the last 10 winners of the Olympic decathlon? Can you name the last 10 Miss America winners, or Miss Universe for that matter? Can you give me the name of 10 people who've won either the Pulitzer or the Nobel Prize? How'd you do? You know what? These people were not second-rate achievers. These were best in their field, but what happens is the applause dies, awards tarnish, certificates get buried with their owners. Let me give you another quiz. Can you think of 3 people who've aided your journey through school? Can you think of a handful of people who have helped you out in a difficult time? Can you think of 5 people you just enjoy spending time with? Can you think of half a dozen heroes whose stories still inspire you? The difference? The people that matter most to us are not the people with the most money, the most fame, the most credentials. They are the people who care. Her name was Mrs. Thompson. And as she stood in front of her 5th grade class on that very first day of school, she told the kids a lie. She told the kids that she would love each one of them the same. But that was impossible because seated there in the front row, slumped over in his desk, was a little boy named Teddy Stoddard. Now, Mrs. Thompson had noticed Teddy the year before and noticed that he didn't play well with the other kids. His clothes are messy and in constant need of a bath, and he could be unpleasant to deal with. At the school where Mrs. Thompson taught, all of the teachers were required to review each child's past records. She saved Teddy's for last. When she reviewed Teddy's reports, she was in for a surprise. Teddy's 1st grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is a bright child with a ready smile. He does his work neatly and has good manners. He is a joy to be around." Teddy's 2nd grade teacher, "Teddy is an excellent student, liked by his classmates, but he's troubled because his mother has a terminal illness and life at home must be miserable." 3rd grade, "His mother's death has been hard on him. He tries to do his best, but the father doesn't show much interest, and his home life will soon affect him if steps aren't taken." Finally, 4th grade, "Teddy is withdrawn and doesn't show much interest in school. He doesn't have many friends, and he sometimes sleeps in class." By now, Mrs. Thompson knew the problem and was so ashamed of herself. Well, it got worse at Christmas when all the other kids brought her beautiful packages wrapped in bright colored ribbons and paper, except for Teddy. Teddy was clumsily wrapped in heavy brown paper from a grocery bag. She took great effort to open it in the middle of all the presents to discover a rhinestone bracelet with some of the rhinestones missing, and a bottle of perfume about less than a quarter full. She stifled the kids' laughter by putting the bracelet on, dabbing some of the perfume on her wrists. That afternoon after school, Teddy Stoddard stayed long enough to say, "Mrs. Thompson, today you smell just like my mom." She cried for at least an hour after the kids left, and in that moment of impact, in that moment, she stopped teaching reading and writing and math and began teaching kids. She paid particular attention to Teddy, and the more she encouraged him, the more he seemed to come alive. The more she focused on him, the smarter he became. So by the end of the school year, Teddy was one of the smartest kids in the class. And despite her lie that she would love all the kids the same, Teddy was one of her favorites. Well, the next year, she gets a note slipped under her door from Teddy that says she was the best teacher he had ever had. 6 more years go by, another note from Teddy. He said that he was getting ready to graduate high school, 3rd in his class. He reminded her that she was still the best teacher he'd ever had. 4 more years, another letter from Teddy. He said it had been tough. He'd stuck with it. It'd been hard, but he was getting ready to graduate college with the highest honors. Again, he reminded her she was the best teacher he'd ever had. 4 more years go by, another letter from Teddy. This time he said he wanted to further his education. He reminded her once again that she was still the best teacher, but this time his name was different. It was longer. It was signed Theodore Stoddard, MD. But the story doesn't end there. Another letter came from Teddy. He said that he had met a girl and was going to be married. He explained that his father had passed away and was wondering if she might consider sitting in the place at the wedding usually reserved for the mother of the groom. Of course she did. You know what else? She wore that bracelet and made sure she was wearing some of the perfume that Teddy remembers his mother wearing their last Christmas together. And as they greeted each other after the wedding, Teddy leans in and says, "Thank you so much. Thank you for believing me. I didn't know I could make a difference until I met you." Mrs. Thompson said, "Oh, Teddy, you've got it wrong. Thank you. I didn't know I could teach until I met you." And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Stoddard is at the Iowa Methodist Hospital in Des Moines, where they have the Stoddard Cancer Wing. You know, you're going to walk out of here today with only one thing that no one else has. Oh, there'll be other people with your job, but you will be the only person in the entire world who has sole custody of your life. I'm talking about your particular life, not your life at a desk, at a computer, at a car, not the life of your mind. I'm talking about the life of your heart, not the life of your bank account, life of your soul. You know, people don't talk about the soul much anymore. But you know what? I've learned to not consider myself the center of the universe anymore. I show up, I listen, I try to laugh. I like to think that I'm a good friend to my friends and they are to me. Without them, I wouldn't have anything to say to you today. I would be a cardboard cutout. So I call them, we meet for lunch. I would be rotten, or at best mediocre, at my job if those things weren't true. You know, you cannot be first rate at your work if your work is all you are. So here's what I want to tell you today. Get a life. A real life. Not a manic pursuit of the next paycheck, bigger promotion, larger house. Do you really think any of those would matter if you blew an aneurysm one afternoon? Found a lump in your breast? Or if your entire family was killed in a plane crash? I want you to get a life where you can stop and notice the smell of salt water pushing itself on a breeze. A life where you stop and just watch how a red-tailed hawk circles over the water. A life where you notice how a baby scowls with concentration when they try and pick up a Cheerio between their thumb and index finger. Get a life in which you are not alone. Find people you love and who love you. And remember that love is leisure, not leisure, it is work. Pick up the phone, write a letter, send a text. Get a life in which you are generous. And realize that life is the most important thing and you have no business taking it for granted. Get a life in which you're care so deeply about it that you want to spread it around. Take the money you would spend on beer, give it to a charity. Work in a soup kitchen, be a big brother, be a big sister. All of you want to do well. But if you don't do good too, doing well will never be enough. You know, it is so easy to waste our lives, our days, our hours, our minutes. It is so easy to exist instead of to live. It's taken me 58 years to learn that simple truth. And I've learned to enjoy the journey, not the destination. And I know this is not a dress rehearsal. Today is the only guarantee we get. And I've learned to look for all of the good in the world and to care about it so deeply and utterly important that I want to spread it around. And in doing so in part by telling people what I have learned, by telling them this. Consider the lilies of the field. Look at the fuzz on a baby's ear. Read in the backyard with the sun on your face. And think of life as a terminal illness. Because if you do, you will live it with all the passion and all the joy as it was meant to live. One of my favorite mantras has always been, in every man there is a king. Speak to that king and he will come out. Isn't there enough evil? Isn't there enough hatred and bigotry and intolerance in the world already? Let's start improving and influencing positive change by looking for those moments of impact, even if it's only one at a time. Be genuine. Be certain of who you are and what you stand for. Be present, because who you are and what you do make a difference. Who we are and what we do make a difference. I'd like to close the way we close our typical yoga class. It simply means the light in me acknowledges the light in you. Namaste. Those are just some things I wanted to share with you. Thank you so much.